Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Challenging Emotions podcast. That includes my husband, Jim. Jim very kindly lets me talk about his journey with his mental health and also his experience of a neurodiverse man diagnosed autistic, ADHD, living in a neurotypical world. So that will come into our conversations as well. And we thought, especially because I do a lot of work with guys, that it would be great to do episodes together. So, this is our first one. We've had a bit of fun getting ready. I'm surprised we didn't have a row.
Yeah. I've just realised that the flowers are all higgledy-piggledy.
Oh, yes. Never mind. This is us.
Is it Brene Brown who says the gift of the imperfect?
Yeah, it won't hurt, will it, for both of us to not be perfect?
Well, I think it's called The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting, which is a book for fucked up people who've had fucked up childhoods. Am I allowed to say fuck?
I was just going to say,
beep.
If you're listening with your children present, too late. So, I thought, just for the first one...
We've got a consent form for that.
For the first one, where would you like to start? You decide, obviously you're the one who's had the journey. I share about what happened in 2021. The listeners don't know what happened in 2021 yet, because this is our first episode.
Is there anything you haven't shared?
But I share on social media. The podcast is new, so how about
So we need intros then, really, for people who don't... Hello, Fly. For people who don't know. I could open the window and it might go out. Or...
There's a fly in the oven already. This is...
Again, it's the gifts of imperfect. What's Brian Eno says, honour thy mistake as... I can't remember the exact language, but honour, talking about music production, if you make a mistake, honour it as if you meant to do it on purpose and see where that takes you. Yes,
and in fact, the music I use for my MP3s, just realised I was clicking the camera, so we've probably been wobbling for the last few minutes. Your friend that did that piece of music actually had a little piece of imperfection, and you heard it, and he replayed the imperfection. And you said, I heard him do that, but he's replayed it again, which means it's no longer imperfect.
That's the thing they taught us in jazz school as well. I did part of a jazz degree.
Coming back to...
in the middle of talking.
Welcome.
No, to be fair...
Welcome to my husband's world.
To be fair, no, because you know the story, you went, yes, but I didn't finish telling it to the good people on the other end of the camera / microphone. If you make a mistake in jazz, do it again, because then people think you, even if there's a most horrendous noise, do wait a couple of beats and go do again, and then people go, oh, he meant it.
I thought that's what you said the first time, which is why I shared the story.
I don't think I finished the point, and I was aware that the person on the other end of the recording device would not know what I was talking about, and it appeared that you just moved on without letting me finish, which is fine when there's the two of us, because we know. Famously, Dany will say, what's that film with that girl from that thing in? And I'll be like, oh, you mean... I'll just connect dot to dot to dot and know exactly who you mean straight away.
So
apparently it's autistic shorthand as well. Apparently Bill Gates, Microsoft founder, for those who haven't heard of Bill Gates for some reason, will just have really high bandwidth conversation, they called it, where they just say half of a sentence to each other and the other person will go, oh yeah, so I could, and he's like, yeah, and then you could, oh right, so I could, and they just get massive concepts across really quickly.
I hope that all of our listeners are
still there.
Able to listen at this high bandwidth, not finishing any sentences. We're here to talk about mental health, and as you can tell, we also enjoy having a laugh. And actually, that's how I work with all my clients, that this doesn't have to be all serious just because life is serious or has been serious with a mental health incident. Back in 2021, you had severe burnout, didn't you? You were off work for about 9 months.
Yeah.
That was the point that you got diagnosed autistic and ADHD, but we have a son already diagnosed, so we kind of knew it.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
And people who work in the industry that I'd volunteered at autistic kids school, they said, "You're autistic," you know. I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." That explains a lot.
It was probably as much autistic burnout as...
which is apparently a thing for people who get into their mid-40s, fighting with reality and... Yeah.
So perhaps for this first episode of us together, I mean, I'm sure we'll go back and forth on this journey and there won't be any sort of straight line in terms of the history of it all. But maybe you could share for this first time what it was like for you leading up to that time. I remember the day where I realised how bad it was because my laptop had broken, and we're not allowed to say Jim will fix it anymore, but we call it, so we say Daddy fix it now. But Jim's always a fixer, so if there's something wrong, he's a tech guy, so if there's something wrong with tech, it's almost like
instinct,
you can't leave it. And he didn't quite leave the problem. I had a screen and he managed to plug in something so I could do work, but that was it. And I thought, oh, something's wrong here.
But I seem to remember having to go away and think, oh, okay, now we've had a little bit of a think, we could just give you a monitor and a cable so you can at least access your computer and your software.
Yeah. As opposed to opening up my laptop and finding the problem and solving it.
Normally I'd have a screwdriver out and be swapping over LCD panels and stuff.
So that was the moment I realised how severe things were. And we'll talk about this another time, but that was a real, like, oh shit moment for me, because my whole work is around supporting mental health and understanding emotions.
Say your whole work is around getting me to fix stuff.
I thought you were going to say, I went, oh shit, this is what I've never been married to. I don't know why, that's what I thought you were going to say.
The facade has dropped.
Anyway, maybe you could share for this first episode, what was it? I'm laughing now at your mental health crisis. What it was like for you.
Yeah, I don't immediately have accessible, intimate, precise memories, but I do remember, I'm glad you actually said the bit where I couldn't think, because it was definitely a downward spiral into that state where I can no longer decide what pair of shoes to wear, or...
It's all right, you've only got one pair.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of my life, as an autistic guy growing up the way I did, and being intelligent enough to be able to learn ways of navigating people, society, jobs, what's expected of me, and rules of existence that a lot of people kind of just sort of get or pick up very quickly. Every time I learnt a new rule, it added a weight to me. In technology, you get firewalls, and you add a firewall rule on top of a firewall rule, and eventually a firewall will get slow and not work properly because it's got 60 million rules layered on top of each other, and that's how I feel I ended up in this downward spiral of pressure on pressure on pressure, navigating this, learning that. Okay, so now I have to think, if I want this and I want this, then Dany is that, or whatever. Not to blame you, but obviously in day-to-day you're my main customer in computer terms, in technology terms, so you're the one that I would build these rules up for, because you are my society living in the house, and it was lockdown as well, so it's pretty much just you and me and Benji. It just got to the point where I can no longer, my rule set is full. I cannot think, I cannot function, I cannot even access my rule set, which is why the silly example of shoes, but like with your computer, is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, in my brain, now I'm thinking, I was probably thinking, well, we could do this or we could do that, but I literally couldn't form a question. The part of my brain, the creative part of my brain that thinks, okay, well, we could do that, or we could do something in between. I just didn't have access to that rule base at all. I had fatigue isn't the right answer. Exhausted is closer to it. Fatigue isn't the right word. I was literally mentally exhausted in the sense that I couldn't think creatively or make a decision or...
Yeah, because normally you frustrate me because you leap straight into, right, well, action mode, let's find a solution. And observing, I know you were saying that your brain might have been doing the thinking, but it just looked like nothing.
No, it wasn't doing that. I'm thinking now, sorry, in trying to recreate it, my natural instinct is to think, oh, well, my brain must have been going, what should we do now? Should I get my toolkit? Should I, analysing the situation? Is this the laptop that there aren't any screws on and the screen surround just comes off quickly? I couldn't get to that phase. I was literally like trying to open a box and make a decision, and I just couldn't lift the box.
Yeah, almost like in a nightmare.
Weird analogies,
of
but
like sort of your normal.
Yeah, it's paralysed.
Your normal thing, but not being.
Yeah.
And although obviously the example that you gave us was around an autistic man who has spent years and years and years kind of like trying to work out these rules. The point you ended up at, I would say, is something that a neurotypical person who has pushed themselves too far so that they've got to burnout, what's going on in the brain, what happened to you, I would imagine they would be able to relate to.
Okay, I haven't Googled it actually, but it's an interesting question. Is it physiologically the same state as a neurotypical person's breakdown? Yeah, that the access to the question answering ability of the brain was
we
gone.
start protecting ourselves, don't we? So when we go into an emergency state, the actual kind of cognitive thinking part of our brain actually is not the most useful when we go into that kind of fight flight kind of response, which the emergency state is if you've gone into that burnout.
But you're not normally aware that you're not thinking because the adrenaline's going through as well. Yeah, that's interesting actually.
So because what I don't want people necessarily listening to this to feel is that this is just about, not just, but is about you as an autistic man. Obviously it's a major player into where it led, but a lot of what I do with the sharing about your experience, I feel is quite general to people struggling with their mental health, and particularly because I work a lot with guys now, because that, having experienced what we experienced, it kind of threw up a passion, as you know, for me. And not all of my clients, interestingly quite a few of my clients sit there saying, oh, we have got kids with autism, or and they're starting to kind of feel that familiarity as well for themselves, even though they're not diagnosed. But not all my clients are like that, but I still see some similarities across the piece with these high achieving guys, successful, but not necessarily feeling that they that they're able to kind of
perform.
Yeah, and also thank you for kind of filling in my language for me, because what I'm trying not to do...
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was right, but that's where I...
What I'm trying not to do is make assumptions, because obviously I don't want to make assumptions about what you're thinking, because I know how my clients are specifically, because I'm working with them, but you and I are in a different kind of world. I did some help with you to get you out of the burnout, but we don't work together, obviously, me in my professional mode, so I don't want to make assumptions about where you're at either. But I see a lot of similarities with the guys in that they're making decisions around what they think works for everybody else. They are inadvertently often blaming their loved ones and believing things not to be true around their choices, and then that's impacting on their mental health because they're starting to feel kind of more helpless. So I tend to work more with kind of men in their 40s and 50s, which I don't wish to everyone to kind of move to young women, fast cars, as I say this, but that midlife crisis kind of place.
Some stereotypes are true, and the Western male has a midlife crisis, burnout around 40, 50.
Yeah, but actually it's the kind of the pressure of the growing responsibilities. So this is what I'm saying. Although yours has been a lot of masking, I see a lot of similarities with the guys I'm working with in terms of it's all right when you're younger and you're, you've got the energy, you haven't got the commitments, you haven't got the responsibilities, striving to succeed, do well, but then all of a sudden you have your business or your career plus your, what you're believing your wife needs from you, maybe she does need from you, what your kids need from you, and then all of a sudden it all piles in. But because men aren't necessarily taught to talk and speak about their feelings, it starts to...
Or ask for what they want, or even recognise what they need to be able to ask for it.
Yes. So this is kind of an introductory session. We're going to be talking loads about this, but
it's all relative to the bigger picture that you want to paint, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the sessions with you, what I'm really looking for is for other guys to start to feel more comfortable with sharing, because I thought we spoke a lot until the shit hit the fan, and I'd realised that about 3 years of you struggling had somehow passed me by. And I know since you were so unwell, you do a lot of reaching out to your friends, making sure everyone's okay. You're happy for me to talk about this because you know it's important for guys to share. So
I'm sharing and work with the ADAPT network.
Yeah, and you're obviously doing this podcast with me now. So to close off this session, because otherwise we'll just sit here and talk for days and just go through the entire history of everything. But to close off this session, what is something that you would share from... Because I don't want to paint a picture right now that also everything's rosy. You are a neurodiverse man living in a neurotypical world. We do have a son who's also autistic ADHD. There's a lot of pressures on you. So it's a daily challenge, isn't it, for you with your mental health? So what would be one golden nugget thing you'd like to leave people with, both for any guys listening, but also their wives, their sisters, their friends?
It's going to sound a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but actually the one thing that immediately jumps to mind is that whoever you are listening or watching, you are doing something. Just by watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, you are exploring the world of communications around your mental health. Even if you don't feel that you're mentally not unwell. But, if you're listening to this for another reason, not specifically for yourself, but looking to help your partner or a friend or just for interest, you're still engaging in the world of mental health awareness. It maybe feels like a cop-out answer, but the one thing anyone who's listening to this can take away from it is you did something today. You listened to this.
Yeah.
That is a thing. Doing this, consuming this podcast is a thing. Well done.
I love the fact that you went can, not should. Because that's a thing of mine. That's the thing I always say.
Should is one of those loaded words, isn't it?
If you hear should, always actually say to yourself, why should I? And I don't mean kind of like, why should I? But it is a good way to check in, to make sure, am I hearing somebody else's voice? So I love the fact that you did that. it's nice to know he listens to me. On that note, I think good first episode. I hope the viewers, the listeners have enjoyed it. It's going to be a bit of a nuts ride. I don't think we're going to embrace imperfection with this this side of the challenging
Something
emotions.
is better than nothing.
This challenging emotions podcast, this you and me bit. We could also probably end up talking about our parenting journey with a neurodiverse kiddo. I'm sure there's lots we might end up talking about.
Shout out to Benji.
Marriage with an autistic guy. Marriage to me. So yeah, on that note, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for sticking with us, and won't tell you what we'll talk about next time because, as you probably gathered, we didn't really plan too much for this one. So we'll be as surprised as you are. On that note, thank you for listening. Oh, check in on the feelingzone.com and the Feeling Zone Instagram, Dany Griffiths on LinkedIn, if you want to find out more about the work that I do supporting men with their mental health, but all sorts of other things as well in terms of generally challenging emotions stuff that can help you.
Cool. Ciao.